Good afternoon, everyone. Did you know that there are more than 400,000 Roma people, women and men, girls and boys in Ukraine? Many of them are displaced at the moment. Julian and I have a very important task today. We want you and other people in Finland and in Europe to get to know about the struggles, the efforts, the activism, the work that Roma people are doing during this extremely violent and difficult times in Ukraine. We know that minority-led activism remains sometimes the other of civic movements activism. We also want that the histories of war and Roma histories during wartime and in this time in Ukraine are recognized, acknowledged, and known. We in Europe have a history of not always writing nation-states histories and war histories from the perspective and with minorities. This is one of the sources of inequality and continuous racism and marginalization against Roma people in Europe nowadays. Ukraine has a possibility to do things differently. It has the possibility to do social justice for Roma now, during the war, and after the war. Our talk is about minority courage and minority activism in Ukraine, but certainly we want to recognize that right as we speak, minorities also do courageous acts and struggle in many other violent contexts. Just to mention some: Armenia, Palestine, Sudan, and Myanmar. We don't want the Ukrainian minority courage to be hierarchically upper than other courage somewhere else, because certainly this is not the case. But let me now welcome Julian with us. So he is with us from the office of Roma Women Fund Chiriclin Foundation in Kiev. Julian, welcome.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Anca. Thank you for an excellent introduction. I'm very humbled to have this role as a keynote speaker. Even though we're meeting online, I'm really honored to be with you today. Due to travel restrictions imposed during the ongoing war in my country, it makes it difficult for us to get together in person. But due to the power of technology, we have this exceptional moment to talk and to share our views, my views on the situation of Roma in my country. So we'll tell you a little bit of some personal things about myself. I, as was mentioned, live in Kiev, a city full of resilience and strong spirit of resistance. I myself consider my current job occupation as more than a job. It's rather a lifestyle that I consciously chose. And sharing a little bit from my personal life, I can say that during harsh times, it's really difficult to remain hopeful, always hopeful, and look far ahead. But I find solace and expression by doing simple things sometimes, like driving my old classic car, or that has seen many journeys, or just doing my hobbies like creating electronic music. And of course, my family, my work, and these simple passions that I mentioned are, to me, are a testament to the vibrancy of life, even amidst the turmoil.
Thank you, Julian. What can you tell us about courage, the topic of the festival, or the hardship of being courageous in times of extreme violence and insecurities?
Coming from Ukraine, a country where courage has become, over the last few years, much more than a trait of our country, it's rather a daily routine of ordinary people. Courage, as I understand it today, is not only the act of running into the fray, of standing up against the visible enemy, it is also the resilience and fortitude of continuing living life despite the widespread destruction and the daily horrors of war. This courage is not always loud or boastful. It can be quiet, persistent, and often goes unnoticed. As a Romani activist, I have been, since the invasion, I have been at the forefront of the efforts to assist many people in need. Since Russian aggression started, everyone in the Roma movement was very concerned about how to continue the work. And today I'm here to discuss the topic that really resonates deeply with Roma in Ukraine and Ukrainian society. Courage is something very inherent, I would say, to our daily acts of personal communication and work. In the Roma community and across Ukraine, courage we can see in the eyes of mothers who comfort their children during the air raids, in the determination of volunteers who bravely go through dangerous roads to deliver the aid. And it's also in the spirit of elderly people who share the stories of survival and hope. It is also found in every individual who dares to dream of peaceful future, even as we live through this turbulent present.
Dear Julian, if we think about the Roma Women Fund Chiriclin, and maybe even wider, to the development of Roma civil society and Roma activism in Ukraine, you personally, and also the Roma Women Fund Chiriclin, had an important role in supporting and make it visible Roma activism in Ukraine. What would you like to share with us about this?
The story of my organization goes back to almost 30 years, but I will try to briefly give the key points about it. So it started with my parents being professional musicians and dancers back during the Soviet times. They were well known far beyond Ukraine and well accepted in the non-Roma environment. With the dissolution of the Soviet Union in early 90s, my parents established an NGO, Association of Roma of Izmail, in my hometown, Izmail, in the south of Ukraine. Through culture, self-determination, so working with these topics, we made it like a transformative path to working with protecting human rights and gender equality. So this was the rise of this human rights perspective, kind of, was during the early 2000s. And women leadership, as gender movement impacted us very much, women leadership has flourished in our community. My mom and my sister were one of the first leaders standing tall against the backdrop of predominantly male leaders among Roma. So I would say women have led up, like with the development of our organization and the movement, women started to lead initiatives, provide aid, became to some extent like the pillars of strength in our communities. During these times of turbulence, however, and turmoil, I want to highlight the role of the unity that makes Ukraine stand against current challenges, against the aggression. Ukraine has very, I would say, unique civil society that knows how to unite and when to unite, and we saw it on many occasions in the last 20 years. Roma community in Ukraine and across Europe has also united in many remarkable ways to help people, not just Roma, and from organizing aid deliveries to providing temporary housing, legal support. Roma activists and volunteers have worked tirelessly for the good of Roma and other marginalized people. We have established networks of support, proving that in the face of adversity, our solidarity grows stronger. One of the initiatives we are most proud of is the shelter for temporary housing for internally displaced people, which is based in Mukachevo, Western Ukraine, one of the safest areas these days in our country. And just to mention, give you a little bit of reference to how it was over the years, like throughout the history of Roma in Europe, I think we have faced adversity, persecution, and discrimination in very different forms as a nation. And nevertheless, we have never faltered in our quest for justice and equality. Roma movement is relatively young, international Roma movement, and I think we are still undergoing a lot of changes, positive, both negative. Of course, many external factors impact us also as citizens of countries where we live. The current challenges have tested us really like never before, pushing the boundaries of what it means to be courageous. Amidst the chaos, we have found strength in our unity, supporting each other's burdens and celebrating even small victories as one.
Wonderful to hear about the coalitions between Roma activists and NGOs and other NGOs, about the successes and the further possibilities. You mentioned the shelter in Western Ukraine, and we know that the lack of housing is one of the key human rights issues at the moment among Roma, internally displaced, and other internally displaced persons in Ukraine. Would you like to tell more which are the human rights violations that you are working with at the moment?
Sure. Well, let me give you a little overview of some of the key numbers and key points, I would say, relevant to our situation. As you mentioned in the beginning, it's approximately up to 400,000 Roma living in Ukraine. This is particularly important because it's the estimates of the civil society organizations, and our state census is very outdated. It's from 2001. So when it comes to implementation of policies, it's very important that we have these figures that are more kind of realistic to what the real situation is. And of course, Roma face numerous challenges, like including lack of personal documents, which renders many Roma as invisible citizens. A quarter of the entire Roma population of Ukraine, so almost 100,000 people, has been displaced internally, but also looking for a refuge in the neighboring countries or beyond. At the same time, many Roma individuals, despite social and economic exclusion, marginalization, they're still fighting for Ukraine, creating, as I call it, a social paradox, where the invisible protects or strive to protect the visible, proving that Roma actually belong to Ukraine and any other country we live in. So here, the main point is that Roma should not be underestimated as a human capital. Despite, of course, some positive strides that I described, daily life for many remains challenging. We continue to face hate speech from the state officials, unfortunately, police profiling sometimes, and also there are cases of school segregation, just to name few examples. These discriminatory practices, they of course hinder our progress to break the cycles of poverty and social exclusion, but they're also indicative of some of the weak spots of our institutions and society as a whole. Securing Roma rights during the ongoing war is also a test for Ukraine, given the fake narrative of the Russian propaganda about the so-called ruling Nazi regime in Ukraine. Roma are often labeled as criminals, mixing it with our culture. So this, I think, media plays a big role in it. But it's also crucial to understand that criminality is not part of the Romani culture. It's rather a result of the social injustices that persist through generations. Poverty itself, I think, increases the risk of involvement in criminal activities, regardless of our ethnicity and background. And this is the task for us, for civil society organizations, and of course for state institutions, to draw a line between culture and social situation and make it clear that poverty should also be eliminated as a factor that puts people under risk. Of course, we work on providing opportunities for change of the narrative as well, especially now when we have kind of the window of opportunities.
Julian, during this extreme violent time and harsh time from human rights protection and fulfillment point of view, we also have new forms of solidarity and activism which emerge from these very hard conditions. Is there something about new forms of activism and solidarity and courage in the end that you would like to share with us?
I would say the Russian aggression against Ukraine has indeed pushed us for search of new forms of activism and expressing our solidarity. And the Roma communities has been active part of this development, I would say. The Roma community's response to the aggression in Ukraine can be marked by, I would say, flexibility, inclusiveness, and deep sense of solidarity, as you also referred to it. Through expanded partnerships and inclusive distribution of aid, community-led initiatives, we have demonstrated that our strength is really, once again, lies in the unity of people in Ukraine, and of course beyond Ukraine. During these violent times, we recognized the need to adapt and expand our efforts beyond our own community. As I mentioned, we were one of our fundamental decisions was to channel the aid and some of the resources that we had beyond the Roma community. This decision was driven by our commitment to show solidarity with other people in need, people affected by war, to demonstrate that we are an integral part, to prove that we are an integral part of the Ukrainian society. Many of the initiatives at local level were led by the local activists, and this also, I think, a position we share in Chiriclin, that we should empower the local level activists who run very diverse range of initiatives like quick emergency assistance, providing food, shelter, medical treatment, or other forms of support. The grassroots efforts showcased the resilience and resourcefulness of the Roma community and highlighted the critical role of community leadership in the times of crisis. And speaking about the expanding of the networks, I would say we did work on expanding it beyond the Roma so-called bubble by working together with other CSOs, with our partners, also from Helsinki, with the Diakonissalaitoksen Foundation. We started some of the new initiatives that are very helpful for us, for Roma in Ukraine, specifically targeting humanitarian needs. And this collaboration not only strengthened our efforts, but also helped to break down some of the barriers and build trust between different communities. And last but not least on this part is the advocacy and awareness. I think alongside providing immediate aid, we also focused on advocacy and raising awareness about the plight of all affected communities. We used our platforms to highlight stories of solidarity, resilience, and courage, and helping foster a sense of unity and shared purpose among diverse groups. And I think the international attention to the situation of Roma has been on the rise, especially due to the fact that many Roma are defending Ukraine.
Yes, Julian, we have been talking about how minorities and Roma have become more part of the nation state during wars in Europe, and also this is the case in Ukraine, as you say. So there is a tendency that Roma become brothers and sisters in arms during war. And I think our colleagues from the Finnish Roma Association have been sharing with us about the situation of Finnish Roma during the wartime, how Finnish authorities and Roma people themselves underlined the brotherhood in arms. But they also tell that once the war ended, they felt as they were the gypsies again. And there are concrete examples on how Finnish Roma did not receive similar compensation and recognition here when the war ended. What do you think about this, and how do you work towards making sure that Roma and minorities are inclusively taken on board by the institutions and by the whole society in Ukraine?
It is a very thoughtful question. I would say that experience of the Finnish Roma during the Second World War and during and after the war deeply resonates with many marginalized communities, including us in Ukraine. And it also highlights the painful historical pattern where solidarity during times of crisis can be quickly overshadowed by the systemic discrimination once the immediate threat subsides. The concept of brotherhood in arms is indeed very powerful. It represents unity, shared purpose, but as history shown on multiple occasions, such unity can be fleeting. And while for Finnish Roma, this fleeting solidarity meant they were left without compensation and faced continued discrimination after the war, I think the historical injustice is a poignant reminder of the work we must do to ensure that such patterns do not repeat. In other words, this is very much will depend on our efforts to show positive contribution of our Roma to our country. In Ukraine, the Roma community, as we discussed, has a long-standing discrimination and marginalization. But despite these challenges, we also talked now about the courage and patriotism by actively defending Ukraine during the current conflict. And our involvement as civil society actors to support Ukraine and our institutions to be taken as full citizens, this is something we really try to stress these days. And to ensure that Roma community is not sidelined after the war, at Chiriclin we're undertaking engagement in dialogues and broader conversations about the future of Ukraine, about its modern identity, economic revival, and inclusivity that we try to build. Our goal is to impact a positive change in our society where Roma are not seen as others, but as equals. This courage shown by Roma during the war is a testament to their commitment to Ukraine. And it's our collective responsibility to ensure our contributions are recognized and valued after the war has ended. So by addressing these issues, we hope to prevent the reoccurrence of historical injustices and create a more fair future for Roma in Ukraine. And here, last but not least, something on what we rely very much is the EU-Ukraine approximation these days. EU integration, reconstruction of Ukraine, and receiving foreign aid is a vital element of the changes we're undergoing. And these processes should come with legally binding commitments or with some sort of political obligation to support marginalized communities, support Ukraine in its transformation to more inclusive society.
Julian, what is your last thought? What would you like us to take with us today about courage?
As we gather here at the festival, celebrating our cultures, our stories from around the globe, let us remember that each of us has a power to enact change. And we do so not just through the grand gestures, but often through some simple acts, courageous acts of continuing to live, love, and hope. So I really thank you for this opportunity to share a little bit from what we do.
Thank you. Thank you.